In a recent episode of Decoding Seafood, we went to Mars with Dr. Benz Kotzen, Professor of Landscape Architecture and Nature-Based Solutions at the University of Greenwich. Dr. Benz is a leading expert in sustainable agriculture and aquaponics, and he provided a fascinating insight into how we might grow fish and vegetables in outer space. This time, we're coming back to Earth to explore the potential for using the same systems in the developing world and for tackling hunger and climate change. We'll be right back.
Seafood isn't just a dish, it's a global story. The Decoding Seafood by Moe podcast series explores the science, sustainability, and surprising truths behind the seafood you love, straight from the voices of those shaping the industry. From chefs, scientists, influencers, and insiders who live and breathe seafood and uncover what most of us never see. Hosted by Chef George Duran, you can find Decoding Seafood here on your favorite platform and at marineharvestseafood.com.
Welcome back to Decoding Seafood podcast. Dr. Benz, last time we spoke about fish on Mars and aquaponics, and this time we're going to delve a little deeper into that. How are you, sir?
I'm good, very good, thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what happened last time. We spoke about aquaponics. Can you tell us, to the folks who weren't listening to that last podcast, what exactly is aquaponics and how long has it been used for and used for research?
So basically, aquaponics is a food production system which joins together principally hydroponics and aquaculture. And hydroponics, as we know, is growing plants or vegetables, etc., in water, so nutrient-rich water. In hydroponics, it's normally supplied by chemicals. In aquaponics, it's the fish, part of the aquaculture, which are supplying the nutrients rather than putting in artificial chemicals. So what you have is a simple system in a way where you have fish tanks, which of course the fish need to live in something. If they're not living in a lake or a pond or something like that, or a river, you have to have some kind of artificial tank. And normally these are either stainless steel or plastic. They're normally round because fish don't like square things because they bump into square things. They like going round. And then basically between the plant system, which is can be different kinds of ways of passing water through the plant roots, we have a filtration system. And this can be very sophisticated in kind of commercial systems, or be very kind of less technological, very kind of gravity-based and very simple systems by passing the fish water through these net systems. We're getting to the plants. So once the effluent-rich water comes through from the fish, it can drain by gravity through the filtration system. It goes into what we have here. We have plant tanks, and the plant tanks can be of different kinds. We have what we call a raft system or a deep water system, where the plants, when they're small, they plant it into a raft which has got holes in it, and the roots go into the water, and it's about a foot deep. And this allows the roots to actually go up to a foot deep, and they can fill the plant tank as the water is passing through. We have another system which is called an NFT system. That's a nutrient film technique, which is basically where you have still the plants in a kind of raft system, but in much more like a gutter system, where there's a very thin film of water going through. And then we have something called the gravel system or granular system, where the plants are put into gravel, and then the water passes through the gravel.
So now, let me just get this right. So you're telling me that you can actually, let's say, farm fish, through aquaponics, use their waste byproduct to also farm vegetation, or at least aid in the farming of vegetation at the same time, meaning now you have the protein and you even have some lettuce on the side, seaweed, whatever it is that grows in the ocean that you can actually consume as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's the brilliance of it, is you're producing two products, or maybe even, you can even produce more products, etc. The thing I think that most people don't realize is that the roots of plants, first of all, usually for vegetables, they don't go very deep. So even if you're planting them in soil, they're going about 300 millimeters deep. Now, the reason why they only go 300 millimeters deep in soil is because roots, all parts of the plant need oxygen. So the leaves, of course, are up above the ground level, they get oxygen. And then in the first 300 millimeters of soil, there's enough oxygen to keep those roots alive. I don't know if you've ever put a plant, let's just say, into some water, or even cut flowers into some water, and the water becomes nasty and
yes,
whatever it is, and
always.
the plant starts rotting. It's because there's no air, there's no oxygen in the water. Now, because we have the water flowing between the fish and the plants, and it's being pumped back out. And we also have, as part of the system, we also blow air into the system. It's a way of actually keeping more air into the system. Pretty much any plant can grow in that water because it's oxygenated. Talking about, again, how many, how much produce or the kind of produce you can produce, you could, we have a system, we tried it. So we might not only be growing lettuce at one time, we could have all sorts of okra, for example, or water spinach, or anything really. Even root plants like carrots and things like that can grow, but it doesn't make sense to do things like that.
Yeah, and last time we were speaking about growing on Mars, obviously way in the future, if it even comes to fruition. But then is the allocation of something like oxygen that is probably worth a lot on somewhere like Mars, is the allocation into the aquaponics system worth it? So you can get what you say is now fish and vegetation at the end.
Good question. So actually, it's very worth it because actually, as we know, plants produce oxygen. But we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the rainforest or the Amazon or whatever it is. We would be suffocating with carbon dioxide. And somewhere like Mars is very rich. I don't know what the percentage is. Very, very rich in carbon dioxide. So human beings, nothing will be able to grow outside. So everything will have to be hermetically sealed. And actually, there are studies in the United States. I think it's probably in the Mojave Desert or one of those deserts where they have these pods, etc., and they're pretending to be on Mars, and they're living. They have plants. They have living walls in there exactly to produce oxygen. So by having plants that you're going to be eating, yes, you're adding to the oxygen. And actually, you can just pump in the carbon dioxide into, let's say, a tunnel or a unit where you're going to be growing plants. So actually, they're more beneficial than just being able to eat them.
Understood. Let's take it back down to earth and talk about how something like aquaponics would help with sustainable food production, particularly in areas where the soils are underdeveloped or there's no water there. How do we apply that into a situation like this?
Well, there are a couple of things I guess we need to say about aquaponics as well, which is that it's very efficient in terms of energy. Basically, most of the kind of water flow that you're getting between the fish and the plants as it comes back is you just have to raise the water back from the plants to the fish. So from that point of view, it's quite efficient. So the thing I think we spoke a little bit about last time is that one of the things about our other planets is that there's no organic material. And on Earth, we know that in order to grow something, we need the soil. We don't need the soil for to hold the plants because we know that we can grow plants in water. We need the soil because it's got nutrients, minerals, and also it's got organic material in it, which is giving us more nutrients. Okay, so in places like Mars, all they have, for example, is weathered rock. It's a basalt rock mainly, and that has basically been weathered over time through, I guess, a long time in the past. It could have been water because they think there's still water on Mars, and then also mainly kind of very, very strong winds. And it's the same thing that you see, in deserts or any mountainous areas, etc. Or we see water carving canyons, etc. And then we see, I guess, in Arizona, we see kind of mountains that are reduced to pillars and columns, etc. because of wind erosion. And so basically what we have on Mars, and this happens in many places, and often, of course, in the poorest and most difficult places on Earth, where there is no organic material, we cannot call it soil. We call it regolith. You cannot call it soil unless actually you've got organic material into it. So on Mars, basically what we would be doing is we would be taking the organic material from either from the remains of the fish or the plants, and we'd be making compost. And this is the same thing we can do on Earth. Now, the reason why it's important to be able to do this is because there are people living in these areas, in these very difficult areas, and also, they also don't have livelihoods. So one of the things I think is very, very important, especially in parts of Africa, is that there are a lot of people who have had traditional livelihoods. Let's say, for example, the two examples, let's say in Kenya, that I know of. One of them are pastoralists. Absolutely amazing. When I went to Kenya, and I'm not sure, I guess it's a little bit like the time when, I guess, people moved across the United States, moved westwards, and there wasn't a fence in sight, and there were wild animals, the buffalo were roaming, etc. This still exists in Kenya, and it's hard to imagine because we think of everything being owned and fenced off. In Kenya, for example, you could go for hundreds of miles or kilometers or even thousands without a fence, and people will be taking their herds, their cows, their sheep, their goats, their camels, whatever it is, across these areas. What happens when the rains fail? What happens when there's no grass? What happens when there are too many animals. And when there's too many animals, what happens is there's a conflict, not only for grass, but water, and there's this social kind of conflict. So in places like this, we need something, I guess it's called, I guess in United Nations speak, alternative livelihoods. And it sounds terrible because, if you're a pastoralist, you want to be a pastoralist. But if you're going to die, if you can't, eventually your animals, you're going to have to eat them, or you're going to have much fewer animals and you're not going to be able to survive, then you need an alternative livelihood. And by having something like aquaponics, you could produce an alternative livelihood quite easily without huge amounts of funds, and it's reducing water as well.
But you also work on programs like restoration of mangrove forests. And I know mangroves are incredibly important to the balance of life, of wildlife, particularly in the world. A lot of forests have been ripped apart in Southeast Asia and throughout the country just to create fish and shrimp farms, and now they're having problems because it's creating poor quality fish. Tell us exactly what mangroves do to the environment, how that's helpful, and what now can we do to grow them back?
Okay. So mangroves are kind of an ecosystem in their own right. They have adapted themselves over, I guess, millions of years or billions of years to be able to survive in saline water, and also mainly in intertidal zones. And these mangroves are, I think you have them in Florida, don't you? I think,
Oh yeah.
They're right along the coasts of South America and Southeast Asia, Africa, everywhere. And because that we were talking, I think, or maybe last time, or it's just in the back of my head, these areas, which you called kind of where two ecologies or two zones meet, are very, very rich. They're the richest kind of ecological areas. The zone between the sea and, I guess, the intertidal areas and land are the richest kind of in terms of biodiversity, in terms of ecology, and in terms of kinds of amounts that can be produced in these areas. So initially, these areas are so rich, and local people could live off these areas. They could go catch fish, small fish. They could go and get the crabs and the mollusks and other mollusks and all the other kinds of things, sea cucumbers, and all sorts of things that are very, very valuable now, for example, especially for the Chinese. Okay, so that's one thing. So people's livelihoods were kind of tied up in these kind of ecological areas. Then, of course, other people came along, and I think entrepreneurs, etc., and probably bought these lands which people thought weren't that important or weren't that expensive, and decided, okay, what we can do is we can create these fish ponds, and we can fill them up with local kind of fish, and instead of having to go and take a trawler out or a fishing boat out, we can produce these fish. So they took out the mangroves, and they took out also other things as well associated with mangroves. And they created these ponds. Now, this was not only for fish, but very often for shrimp. And this worked for a while. So basically, what they would be doing is they would be taking water from the sea and putting this back, and then taking this dirty water from the fish ponds and passing it back into the sea.
We'll be back after this break.
Meal planning just got easier when I discovered Marine Harvest by Mowi. The skin pack keeps the fish fresh for days, offering a variety of healthy meal solutions. Like my hearty tilapia dill sandwich for Monday lunch. Or my build-your-own bowls for my Wednesday social. With your choice of grilled steelhead, coho, or sockeye. A real crowd pleaser that's sure to satisfy any craving.
Oh, that looks so
good. Or when plans change like the weather. I like to cozy up with a comforting cod chowder. For every craving and occasion, there's fin fish variety. From Marine Harvest by Mowi.
It's amazing how you have to be resourceful with when it comes to aqua farming, and some, when whatever kind of fish you're growing, you're trying to mimic the more natural environment, but obviously keep them intact so that you're able to obviously industrialize the fish. At the end of the day, when a lot of people come up to me and they say, "Oh, I never eat farmed salmon," for example. "Oh no, farmed salmon, no, always wild caught." And I think back and I say, hold on for a second. Like, there's not enough salmon in the world to feed you, or fish for that matter. We have to resort to more resourceful and also a sustainable. It can be sustainable too. Methods of feeding the general population who wants to eat fish, which is so good for you in many ways. Obviously, there is this terrible stigma about farm-raised fish. Why do you think we have that stigma? And what can you tell viewers out there, listeners out there, who are very stubborn about not eating farm fish when it can be sustainable and fresh and really good for you?
I think because people are wary because there have been, I guess, some mistakes made in the past, and there have been pollution events, and there have been deaths, etc. I guess that just creates a kind of bad atmosphere, bad press, etc. And that something bad, just it's very difficult to get it out of people's minds. When things are good, they're good. That's the thing. I mean, not only is it the case that if you didn't have aquaculture, people wouldn't be normal, local, let's just say that an ordinary man in the street would not be able to eat fish because it would be so expensive. And then also we cannot keep fishing our oceans or our rivers the way that we do because there's just not enough fish to go around. So only rich people would be eating the fish.
Right.
I think all the methods, the technologies, etc., are improving farming, and that's a good thing. And I guess one of the things we have to realize is nature, in a way, takes care of itself. When there are too many animals, etc., there are events where a lot of the animals might die, and you'd get back to this balance. And I think you mentioned balance earlier on. We need to kind of create the balance. And I think this is the case also with any kind of farming or any kind of aquaculture, is that you don't want to be greedy. We rather have less fish and better quality, and make it available to everybody. But rather than poor quality fish that people just get a bad press and nobody wants to eat it because it's got a horrible taste or because it's got bad press, etc. I mean, the thing about aquaponics, in a way, which is really interesting to me, and nobody's quite understood it, is that the fish that we're using are vegetarian fish, so basically, or they're omnivore. They will eat other kinds of things as well, but basically they're vegetarian, and actually they do much better when there's a link between themselves and plant material, so vegetables and stuff like that. There is something microscopic that's given off by the roots and the plants that goes into the water, which is very good for the health and well-being of the fish. The fish are better in terms of their well-being, and they taste better, and it's been proven. Time and time again that you take a fish that's just grown in an aquaculture unit compared to one that's grown in an aquaponics unit, it's better all round.
Amazing. Some of the things that you work on are very innovative and help us in numerous ways, not just feeding the general population, but a lot of innovation has come out of a lot of the studies. And one of the things that we spoke about last time, and I want to get into it a little bit more, is the use of tilapia skin to help treat burns. Is that still in effect? Is that a growing technology that is going to help burn victims to use tilapia skin? And how on earth was that even discovered? Is really what I want to know.
So I was trying to look at how we could kind of add commercial value to the fish, because if you could be using not just the flesh of the fish to eat, but also the skin of the fish, then you've got something else you're selling. You're making it into a product, and there's obviously it's financially better. So I was looking at that, and I started reading about alternative uses of the fish, and came across papers, and there are numerous papers which have been looking at tilapia skin to be used for very deep wounds and very deep burns. And this started out in Brazil. So why did it start out in Brazil? The reason for it is that in Brazil, and I think like many other countries, I'm not sure it happens in the States or the UK, is they used to use or still use pig skin as a way to treat very bad burns and deep wounds. And there was a shortage of pig skin in Brazil, and so they went to look at tilapia. They went to look at tilapia skin because it's got a lot of collagen in it, and that's what you want. It's the collagen that actually helps to heal. And I think the skin itself is kind of acts as a kind of surface that holds on to the collagen. So that started in Brazil, but there have been studies in the United States. Now, the story continues a little bit. So I've been researching this, and there's a company or companies that actually do produce fish skin, not tilapia skin. They produce fish skin that's made from Atlantic cod. Now, this is brilliant actually, because Atlantic cod grow at a temperature around 4 degrees in the North Atlantic, in the North Atlantic, let's say that. And then basically, when you take out the Atlantic cod, which is actually being fished not for fish skins, this is just a byproduct. It's been fished for the flesh of the cod itself. These fish come out of a water which is 4 degrees centigrade, and any bacteria or anything on this fish are going to die because they cannot stand warmer temperatures, these bacteria. So it basically means that you have a sterile skin, which you can then treat and create into a kind of remedy for these deep burns and for wounds. The difficulty with tilapia is it's a warm water fish. So what happens is that when you take it out of the water, you have to make sure that you can sterilize these skins, and you have to treat them in various kinds of ways, which actually diminishes maybe the quality of the skin itself for use. Although every paper says that using tilapia skin is as good or better than using traditional ways of healing these things on wounds and burns. And the other thing about tilapia is that it's everywhere, especially in the developing world. So the idea is that if we can do some trials and we can look at ways of improving the preparation of the skin. And I'm working with our pharmaceutical professor in our pharmaceutical department here on devices, what they call these skin devices, that we can prepare these in a way that can be more effective. Then we're not going to only be able to treat the rich, but we're also going to be able to treat everybody. Obviously what I'm working on is in Europe, and it's European funding. Actually, the funding protocol I'm looking at includes the United States as well. So. Basically, we're looking at kind of worldwide solutions. So, yeah,
amazing.
What's the space?
Can you?
Happen.
It's just amazing how further we're going in the medical field, but thinking out of the box, just by these small accidents that happen. And I mean, obviously, penicillin was discovered this way as well. So I'm not surprised that this is how we're discovering a way to treat burn victims. What do you see the future of aquaponics looking like, and what is next for you throughout your researches?
We're looking at pushing aquaponics into the developing world. They know about it, but really they haven't used it much. And in fact, I'm trying to think now when I'm going. I think it'll be in November. I'll be going to Ghana to try to get a whole bunch of collaborators together to see how we can introduce aquaponics into areas which are affected by climate change. So this is the whole thing. Again, we talked about people not being able to grow the crops that they normally grow. This is either because of climate change and lack of water, or too much water, and so they can't grow the things that they want to. So we have to try and find ways that they can grow fish as well as vegetables, which they can actually eat themselves, because I think that's the first priority. And then at the same time, they can kind of sell the rest of the produce at market and send the kids to school or university and etc. and just improve the life of every single person and the nation as well. So yes, I do see aquaponics, and I definitely see aquaponics going to Mars, because as we said previously, we can grow plants probably anywhere, as long as you've got the oxygen and the nutrients, etc. But where are you going to get the fertilizer from for your plants on Mars? It's going to come from composting, but actually, if you've got the fish as well, you're going to get a much better fertilizer. Absolutely. I mean, sometimes, like any farmer, or if you're dealing with animals, etc., we have fish die. Very often, in fact, tilapia, we don't have any deaths relating to water quality or anything like that. So we have a net over our tanks, and sometimes for some reason or other, a fish might be jumping and it finds its way and it ends up on the floor. So I have a dead fish. So instead of kind of binning it, you obviously don't want to eat a fish that's been lying there for, I don't know, overnight, whatever it is. I stick it in the ground, and this becomes the perfect kind of, stick it under a tree. This becomes, if it's deep enough, you don't want foxes sticking it up or other varmint sticking it up, but it becomes this perfect fertilizer for what's growing above ground.
Not to mention the calcium that the bones provide for the plant itself.
Well,
It
exactly.
would be incredible.
Exactly.
So, yes, but again, you will have fishy-smelling land everywhere, and you're right, the fox can be issues, but you got to dig it deep enough and compost it and give it back to earth where it came from, pretty much.
Yeah. Or in the hotter areas, you just dry it.
Right.
You just dry it, and then you can mash it up, or you can grind it up, and it's like we know that if you've got an allotment or growing vegetables somewhere, and you put in bone meal and things like that, it's just perfect, really.
Amazing. Well, it's been quite an eye-opening interview. I really feel like there's hope after speaking to someone like yourself that we will survive on this planet. We just have to persevere and also, think a little ahead of what we can do to even though the Earth has changed in the last 100 years. Now we have to figure out what to do to continue surviving here and whatever is going on here, obviously through climate change and so on, and obviously and beyond in Mars.
I mean,
go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this thing that we're doing in Philippines and Indonesia, I just heard yesterday that we got funding to do it. And one of the things, just talking about, what we have going, that we just improve so much over time. We have the nature-based solutions, which people have forgotten in the past, but are coming back. But what we do have, which other people didn't have, and it keeps improving, is the technology. And one of the things we're going to be using is drones aerial drones to plant the mangrove forest, because the problem is so huge that there's just not enough manpower and not enough money to go out and do it by hand. So that's the thing which kind of gives me hope. We've got to look at nature and learn from nature, but actually we know how quickly our technology improves, and that gives me hope that actually, we're going to use these old technologies as well as new technologies to help us along.
And to find that balance. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Kotzen. If people are interested in learning more about aquaponics, can they follow your research online? Where can they find you?
They can find me at the University of Greenwich, and also I think on LinkedIn. They can also, there's a book that we wrote, we edited and co-authored on aquaponics. It's a Springer publication. It has been downloaded 1.81 million times. So it just shows you, it's free. So you can go to Springer online. It's a big fat book if you bought it. It's got everything about aquaponics in there, anything you ever wanted to know. It's there. The other thing, so that's by Springer, and it's called Aquaponic Food Production Systems.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Benz Kotzen, Professor of Landscape Architecture and Nature-Based Solutions at the University of Greenwich. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
No, thank you so much for having me.
And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in to Decoding Seafood by Moe. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider subscribing to our channel wherever you stream podcasts. I'm your host, George Duran. Until next time.